Gentlemen, thank you very much for the work, and please thank the folks that work around you that we don't get a chance to meet in this pleasant setting when we get a chance to gather every time together. Tell them thank you because they do a lot of work behind the scenes. Director Wray, I want to be able to ask you about some of the violence that's happened across the country in the past several months. We've had hundreds and hundreds of peaceful protests on racial injustice around the country that we are grateful as a country we have that option to be able to have peaceful protests and people are allowed to be able to speak out and point issues out. But some of them have turned very violent. And in some of your testimony in the House, it seemed that you were trending to try to connect some groups. Have you been able to identify groups or entities behind the scenes that seem to be organizing nationally to foment violence in some of these events? Or are you seeing these as spontaneous events or small groups that are unconnected with others?
So, Senator, I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the opportunity to try to be as clear as I can because this is an important topic. I think the first thing, big picture, is that as the chairman referenced in his opening comments, when you look across the country, you've got three broad categories. You've got the peaceful protesters. That's maybe the biggest number of people. Then you've got sort of what second category, which is what I would describe as criminal opportunists engaged in looting, low-level vandalism, et cetera. But then you've got a third group, and while it might numerically be the smallest, it's by far and away the most dangerous, the most serious, and the one that we might have to go after the most aggressively, which is the people who are clearly violating federal law, IEDs, Molotov cocktails, specific targeting of law enforcement, arsons of government facilities and businesses, et cetera. Who those people are, that's our priority, that's our focus. Varies their motivation and what drives them from day to day, city to city. However, we have certainly seen a number of violent anarchist extremists participating in that mix. I've gotten a lot of questions from a lot of people about Antifa, for example. So let me try to be as clear as I can about that. Antifa is a real thing. It is not a fiction. Now, we have seen organized tactical activity at both the local and regional level. We have seen Antifa adherents coalescing and working together in what I would describe as small groups and nodes. All of this I said last week, but some of it got more clearly conveyed than others. We have a number of predicated investigations into some anarchist violent extremists who operate, some of whom operate through these nodes and subscribe to or self-identify with anarchist extremism, including Antifa. And we will not hesitate to aggressively investigate that kind of activity. So we're going to be looking at, and we have been looking at, their funding, their tactics, their logistics, their supply chains, and we're going to pursue all available charges. There are also, in addition to that group, there are what I would describe as more militia types. And we've had plenty of those, and we've got a number of investigations into those as well. But I think trying to put a lot of these things into nice, neat, clean buckets is a bit of a challenge, because one of the things that we see more and more in the counterterrorism space is people who assemble together in some kind of mishmash a bunch of different ideologies. We sometimes refer to it as almost like a salad bar of ideologies, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and what they're really about is the violence. And we are not going to stand for the violence.
Nor should you. And the American people are grateful for that we're engaging. Peaceful protest is encouraged and allowed in our country. Violence is not on that. You and I have spoken several times about Oklahoma-specific issues and the McGirt decision from the Supreme Court last year and the significant change that is for the FBI in Oklahoma. We are grateful for your engagement, and I'd continue to be able to ask for your engagement for law enforcement there in Oklahoma as we deal with the dynamics of that decision and what that means for us, and we're grateful for that. Director Miller, before we run out of time, and I've only got a few seconds, and I apologize for that, and it's the issue of China. Director O'Brien has made the comment that there is a rise in China trying to be able to engage in our election this year, and he identified that as one of our greatest threats. Can you briefly comment on that and what you're seeing right now? Is it just influence, or is it in actual cyber attacks in our system?
Thanks, Senator. I look at international terrorism specifically, not really familiar with the
Can anyone else comment on that briefly?
Sure. Briefly, each of the two areas you mentioned, China is a major threat. They're a rising power, and they have every intention of trying to rival and surpass us as a nation. And they have stolen our intellectual property at a level, Director Wray said last week in a phrase I thought was very applicable, the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. It's the Chinese stealing intellectual property from Americans. And for purposes for their strategic purposes, military, intelligence, and their economy. We also face them trying to exercise influence via money and their media enterprises, much more overtly than most other countries are even able to. And last, and absolutely not least in this country, is their massive trade with us, which can be a positive, of course, for both sides, is also used as a lever of influence.
Thank you.
Senator Lankford, we were just informed that Senator Schumer did not invoke the rule today, so we do not have a hard stop. You have another minute, 15 seconds if you'd like to do that. And if Senator Peters would want to tack on another 2 minutes now, or we can do that later. But you can continue your questioning for another
Thank you.
minute, seconds. And we'll have 7-minute rounds.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Let me do my last minute, 15 seconds here. I do want to drill down on this issue about China and trying to malign influence for the election in particular. When Director O'Brien made that comment, obviously we're dealing with Russia and what they had did in 2016. We're all very aware of how they were trying to engage in our election. But his comment seemed to be that China is being even more aggressive behind the scenes this time than Russia was. We also know that Iran is trying to be able to influence our elections. Didn't know if there's any clarity that any of you could bring to that. Obviously, he's not sitting at the table today, but if there were any other comments about that.
Yeah, I would just note that the way China acts in that arena is different than Russia and Iran, in part because they have so many more levers. Iran and Russia don't have the trade with us that China has. They don't have the relationships at every level of government that China has. And they don't have the connections to our economy and so forth. So they don't have the levers that China has available to them. We've seen through this year, COVID was an excellent example as we roll into the election season, where they've got ambassadors in other countries, they've got their foreign minister, they're taking on false narratives aimed at the United States very overtly, and then spreading them through their media outlets in ways that our other opponents don't have available to them. So it's a very unique attack.
Thank you.